Are we ready? Yes, you don't have to listen. Okay, a float mechanism. The float mechanism controls the level of fuel in the bowl. Controls the level of fuel in the bowl. Where should the level be maintained?
The right level. Just the
level.
Oops.
Same level as the strain nozzle.
Must be maintained. You guys are so close. Maintain slightly below the outlet of the discharge nozzle.
Okay.
What if it's slightly above?
It will drip out.
It will slightly leak a lot.
It's really a far level.
Contains the float, the needle, the seat, and as I've already said, the fuel level is critical. Oops. Fuel. Because if it is too low, it's going to be too low will mean you're going to run lean. What happens if you run lean?
Not enough power.
Not enough power, detonation,
All the bad
hot, all the bad stuff. All the bad stuff, yes. Too high is going to be
All the bad
rich and possible leaks. All right, this will help you out in lab. Now everybody's waking up. Who, what? What do you say? All right, measuring fuel level. For the Stromberg carburetor, because the float and bowl assembly or together are in the lower half, you can work with it. Like I said, you can take the top right off of it. You're left with the bowl. And I really thought I had some pictures of this. Hang on. Let's see what we got here. No.
Can you show the video right at the end of it?
What's that? I don't want to go through all that. Oh, that's what I was looking for. Too far, too fast. There we go. So you're left with this. The float's been taken out of this, but you can see there's the seat right there. Got the seat right there. Right there is the what? Main metering jet. This right here is the idle tube. There's the air bleed. Discharge nozzle. Venturi. All right. You guys are doing great. Okay, so because that assembly is all there at the bottom, you can actually adjust the fuel level using fuel, and that's how you would do it. So it, according to the directions, it is tested with a solvent at a specific head pressure. At a specific head pressure. Which is to say they tell you to fill up some sort of can and put it so many inches above the carburetor to give you that head pressure. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. We always measure fuel level away from the edge. Why? Because
of the meniscus.
yes, because if we had a bowl that looked like that, the fuel in it's going to go like this and rise up on the side.
What's the thing that causes that again called? There's like another name.
Meniscus?
No, it's called the
Surface
meniscus?
tension?
Yeah, it was a surface tension. We learned that.
Let's see. Okay, adjustments are made by how?
The seat. The shim is under.
Yes, adjustments. Adjustments are made by adding or removing shims. Shims, I should say. Under the seat. Under the seat. So you actually take the seat out, take out shims or add shims. So one, adding shims. Under the seat, raises the seat. Adding shims, shuts off fuel sooner. And lowers the level. Backwards, right? Add a shim to make the fuel go down.
No, that makes sense.
All right. Removing shims. Shuts off fuel later. And raises level. I don't have this in my notes, so I'm going off memory. There is a 5-to-1 relationship for shims to fuel level. So for every 5, you change
5 shims or 5 fuel levels?
For every 30 seconds difference, yeah, it's 1 30 seconds shim.
Divide the amount that you
Yes.
need by 5.
Yes.
So if you need 1/16 more, you divide that by 5.
That's the size of shim.
Yeah, so it's like fuel level is 5, the shim is 1. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
It's a 5-to-1, so it's not 1-to-1. It's in the manual, and you guys are going to set it up and do that. Now, when you do this, I want you, and I wrote it in the instructions, so it's right there. I want you to do it 3 times. And it's kind of funny because you guys can see that too.
No, he's a sneaky one.
Oh, that's floaters.
You punched like that boxing game.
Huh?
You punched like that boxing game.
I was trying to
That old
catch
like, red and blue.
I thought you were coming to me. I thought you were mad at me.
Now he's making fun of the way I hit him. It's in the directions, but what I want you to do is I want you to do it 3 times. And the hilarious thing is how students have interpreted that over the years. So I had to change the directions. So they would actually, you have to put the bowl, the carburetor onto the machine, and you have to level it. You can't have it, it's got to be level in both dimensions. All right, and then the machine will allow you to do it this way. You got to shim the actual machine to go right and left. And you hook up the fuel, and you open the fuel, and it's going to start coming in. You're going to watch the float go up, and it shuts it off. Take a measurement. And then what people do, they take a measurement, and then they go, well, we'll just take another one, and we'll just take another one. I'm like, well, that's not what 3 times means. 3 times means you raise the level up, take a measurement, then you dump it out, and then you do it again. Right? So make sure you do it that. Dump it. I had to write that. Dump it out each time. So where do you dump the solvent? It filled up in there.
Right back into the sink.
Into the sink. Goes back into the tank. We reuse it. Okay. So you're going to use it 3 times. You're going to use a depth micrometer. And I guess I'll be nice to you and explain to you. I don't have the numbers handy in my head here, but we have a depth micrometer. That'll be red, the depth micrometer, and little pin's going to come down like that. And here's my fuel level, because it's blue. And when it touches it, it goes up like that. Does anybody know what the fuel level is supposed to be?
13, 30 seconds.
So right here, 13, 30 seconds, 13, 30 seconds. All right, it's supposed to be 13, 30 seconds. And what happens if we measured it and it came out to be 15, 30 seconds? You'd be surprised how many people struggle with this. 15, 30 seconds. Is that more or less than 13?
Less fuel, more space.
It's more. It means the fuel level is actually here, and it shouldn't be. So the fuel level is too low. So if you get a bigger number, it's too low. And so am I going to add or remove shims? If it's too low, we need to remove and lower the seat. All right, by 1/5 of that. So that's the hard part. Okay. If you have a Marvel Schebler, some people call them marvelous dribblers. I don't know why. They don't dribble at all. It's a stupid thing to say. The Marvel Schebler. You will also be doing this with a Marvel Schebler. It is measured dry. Measured dry, which means there's no fuel for the initial setup. What you do is you'll have a piece like this with the gasket on it. The gasket don't fit with the thing. Gasket on it, and then you'll have the float in there and a pin, which I don't think is there. No matter. And you actually take it upside down and you use a drill bit and you measure the distance between here and here. It's in the manual, it tells you how to do it. Just measure it there, you measure it there, that's how you do it. Then you put it back together, all the way together. You put it on the bench, and then you put a sight glass on it. So I don't have a bowl here, but you actually put a sight glass on the bowl. So if we had a bowl, if we have the whole carburetor, there's a drain right here. So you're going to put a fitting right here with a clear glass tube or a plastic tube. It's like that. And then when you let the fuel in, the fuel's going to find a level here, and it's also going to show right there, so you can see what the fuel level is. And then you put a certain amount of pressure for so many minutes, and you see, make sure it doesn't change, and then you increase the pressure and you make sure it doesn't change. So it's measured dry, then checked with a sight glass. And the adjustment is made by bending a tab. There's a little tab on here. There's not a little tab on here. On the other ones, there's a little tab on them. There, this one has a tab. Little tab right there. You can bend that tab. It tells you how to do it in the book. This one's got a little tab up there, a little metal tab. So you bend the tab, and they tell you to be very, very careful to not bend the tab while it's attached to the carburetor, because you can actually, you put pressure on the needle, and I don't push down on the seats to do it. Don't. The needle's got a rubber tip, and it'll break it. Okay, I'll go for it. Never check needle and seat with shop air. So there's 2 points to be learned with this story. Point number 1, and the biggest point, and I have to remember it constantly and remind myself of this, do not get involved with somebody's troubleshooting, even if they ask you, unless you're willing to put down everything you're doing. Get involved with what they're doing and fully engaged. Because in the shop, what happens all the time is, you know, I'm busy, I'm working on something, or it could be the opposite. It does not be me. I could be the bad guy or the good guy in this one? Or you're bad? Both are bad guys. You know, I'm busy. I was walking by. We had an aircraft that we just overhauled the engine. I didn't overhaul it. And the same person overhauled the carburetor, probably the magnetos. So everything's been overhauled, and it would put it back on the engine and go to start it, and the thing would just, it was just running crazy. It would like run way up at high RPM and down, way up and high. And then I think it died or something like that. It's like, what the hell? So it was like it was getting a lot of fuel, then it wouldn't, then a lot of fuel, then it wouldn't. So I know they were troubleshooting that. And what's the first thing that is suspected wrong with that engine?
Vacuum leak?
No, come on, seriously. What's the first thing everybody saes?
Timing.
Which timing?
The magneto. Time the magneto.
No, not the magneto. Well, you timed the cam and crank wrong. No, I won't do that. So when you do troubleshooting, you really, it comes down, it's either air, fuel, spark, or mechanical. It's always though. It can't be anything other than that. Even if it's you know, well, you can add electronic stuff, but the electronic stuff just going to control those. So it's one of those things. So, you know, mechanical. What could mechanical be? Well, it's that timing in the back, which it wasn't. It never is. You know, besides, outside of that, you know, a bad tappet clearance or something like that, it's not. So, okay, mechanical, throw it out. Spark. No, even if one magneto was on, then off, then on and off, that's not going to do it, right? So, okay, you can throw out spark right away. That just doesn't sound like spark. So we're left with fuel and air. So what component is that? Carburetor. So they were troubleshooting the carburetor, taking it apart, looking. Maybe it's fuel flow. Maybe it's flow in the nut. And I think it's a high-wing airplane, so no fuel pumps. On and on and on. And here I, you know, walking by. God, I just can't think. You know, what do you think, Kev? I don't know. Kind of sounds like it's getting fuel and it's not. You know, because there's some sort of blockage. Hey, remember one time I had an airplane that was doing that, so I blew it out with shop air, and you know, that's. I did. I had an airplane one time. The guy was going to take off, and he just wasn't getting fuel flow. It was really weird. And so he came to me, and he's like, you know, and I pulled the fuel line off and went into a bucket. And I'm like, this is dribbling out. And there's actually an FAR, how much, I think it's 1.5 times the maximum amount needed. And it's just like dripping. I'm like, man, you got a serious problem. You know, and I opened the vents were good. I'm like, dude, I don't know. You know, I can back blow some air through it. So I, you know, a little shop air, and you could hear it bubbling in the tanks. I took the caps off so it didn't blow up the tanks. And then I took my shop air off, and whoo, it's like a fire hose coming out. And I'm like, ooh, you got a finger strainer up there that's plugged up with stuff. You know, we need to, because they have finger strainers in the fuel tank. It's finger strainer because it's about the size of your finger, and it's just very coarse mesh screen. It'll catch a rat or something like that. Cat, whatever. And I'm like, man, you have some like growth on it or something. We need to take your tanks. You need to clean out your fuel system. Nah, I'm good. And he flew off. Like, okay. So anyway, I was thinking about that. I said, hey, remember that one guy we did that? You know, fuel? He goes, oh, yeah. So, you know, maybe you're not getting, you got a blockage or something, the carburetor. You just got to blow some air through there. So, oh, that's a good idea. So he disconnected the fuel hose. Instead of blowing up through the tank, blew it in the carburetor. Well, I'd never seen these things so flat in my whole life. I mean, they were this thick. So, yeah, it flattened them. Boom.
It's supposed to be like 2-3 PSI going into it.
Yeah, sweet. 120.
There's a little chain going on.
Yeah, so that doesn't work out real well. Let's see. You know, you put shop air into here, and you think that, you know, the needle will be closed, but it doesn't. It goes through the needle.
Push the needle open.
Push the needle open.
And then it would be able to get out fast enough.
Then it doesn't even get fat. So pushes the needle open, just blows it right open, fills this area up, and it has to leak out of this hole or back through these little holes right here. Well, it just doesn't very fast. It will push some fuel out of this way slowly, but first it flattens out the float. And then what happens? Well, now your float level isn't very good.
Yeah.
I guess you could do that if you had those blue ones.
It turned out that, and this is an important, one of the weak points of these carburetors, especially this Marvel Schebler, is this shaft up here. These shafts get real loose and wear out inside the bushings, and so you get air leaks between the shaft. So when you're at idle and you have the gasket here, and the engine's sucking real hard, and you can't get any fuel or air this way because this butterfly valve's closed there. Well, it tries to suck air wherever it can, so it'll come in through the bushings. So it'll run lean at idle. Well, anyway, this particular carburetor, I think it was an HA6. It's one of the side draft carburetors. They're very different, and they have a set of O-rings up here. And the MA4-5s, the big ones like on the 182s, they have a chamber in between. So it's like a wall, an opening, a wall, and then the shaft. And so if an O-ring is missing on one side, they run real rich. If it's missing on the other side, it runs lean. They're really weird that way. And he forgot one of the O-rings in there. I forget, it's been a long time. But anyway, what it was doing is just ingesting a bunch of air, and then it would start to run fast, and then it would that would kill it, and it was weird. But anyway, don't use shop air. Thanks. Don't use shop air, and don't get involved in troubleshooting unless you're willing to commit, because that story's happened a lot. The hey, what do you think it is? And somebody just gives you some stupid idea for troubleshooting, then you're off to the races, and it's like, no, that was really not the idea if you would have thought about it. So, all right.
Did you ever figure out what was wrong with that plane?
I told you it's missing an O-ring.
Oh, on that one.
The one that was running funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was missing an O-ring. He had a really good reason. It had something to do with in the parts manual. It actually failed to point it out. So. There is a fuel strainer, no matter what kind of carburetor it is, inlet fuel strainer. That's usually found on the inlet, or it is found on the inlet. So, found on the inlet side, we are going to check at least every 100 hours or annual, according to me. That's right. It doubles as a coloring book, so. And if you get the later editions, there was a dot to dot in the back.
Got the coloring section for the Stromberg carburetor.
Yes. I don't know if I mentioned this anywhere, so I better mention it right now. Also, drain carbs. Every, I don't know, at least every annual. I don't want to say every 100 hours because sometimes these planes get a lot of time really quick, but at least every annual. What happens with these bowls is the outlet is not always at the lowest point. And so what happens is when you get water, will find its way down to the bottom, and it'll just sit there, and it'll start corroding, and it'll ruin the entire bowl. So there is a drain at the lowest point. There's a drain right there. And so when you open up the drain and you drain out, all the water will come out. So I drain my carburetor every annual.
So the fuel flowing in isn't enough to like stir it up?
Nope, it settles down toward the bottom. There, you have a gascolator on the aircraft that's supposed to separate out the water to begin with. So I don't know if this water just is a little bit condensation from the top of the bowl or something like that.
It's also got air through the top of it too, right?
It does, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I see stuff like that all the time. You might even see it in some of our Strombergs. You'll pull it apart and you look in there. It's like, wow, that's a lot of corrosion. It's because it sat on an airplane somewhere with just a bunch of water in it. All right, we have the throttle plate.
Is that part of also like storage? Is you would drain that and leave it empty?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it seems like having a tangle. Like it was like full of gas.
We do, and I've pickled some engines. I mentioned before, I don't like doing it because you have to spray stuff into the carburetor while it's running.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But, yeah, then I think they have you drain the carburetor and all that kind of stuff. But just go fly it.
Hey, you can run an engine without a prop on it. Is that like a big no-no, or is that? I never see people do it, but I'm wondering if that's a.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it done
We've got one
on
out
something
there.
that I have no responsibility for,
You'd like to see it happen, but not.
just to see what happens.
Oh, got a bunch of 290s.
Yeah, we put our prop on.
No, something that I'm not responsible for. I'm responsible for those. Our ground power unit is like an airplane engine without a prop, but it's got a flywheel that's this big around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do you need that? Balancing.
You have to have something with some weight for some inertia. Even your cars have something on them. What's that?
Flywheel.
Flywheel. Yeah, they're pretty heavy.
So when you spray it in there, do you just do carb heat and then just spray it up under this? Because otherwise you gotta be.
We'll pull the. Well, we did on the test stand. If we're gonna do it, we usually do it on the test stand. Otherwise, the airplanes are gonna fly. So we had to pickle the engine for storage because he was going to somebody who was working on an airplane. It wasn't gonna be done for a while, but the engine was done first. So I would just run the test stand. I just pull the air cleaner off and just spray it right on the bottom of the carburetor.
Get a water gun.
That's exactly what we had, a little spray bottle. That's why I'm doing it like that. It's before the super soakers. That would have been great. All right, so the throttle plate, that's the butterfly valve on the top. That's why I call it that sometimes, throttle plate or throttle or butterfly valve. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page, if it's closed, that restricts the air, which then restricts the fuel. And that would be idle. And if it's open, all the way, that would be max air and fuel. Go fast. So everything's got a butterfly. It doesn't matter what system it is, because that's how you control the speed of the engine. Got to have that. Everything has a throttle. Not everything has a butterfly valve. Rotax don't have a butterfly valve. They have sliding tubes that go up and down.
Like a dirt bike.
Exactly like a dirt bike. Everything else has a throttle valve that I can think of. All right, that was the main circuit. Now we can talk about the idle circuit, or the parts of the idle circuit, or how the idle circuit works. Okay, good. So when the throttle is closed, idle position, very little air is flowing. That's a bit of a relative term. You guys will have the opportunity. You're going to be running an engine without an air cleaner on it. The bottom of the carburetor is exposed. If you'd like, put your hand over the bottom of it.
I feel like that's a trick.
I won't do it. I've seen some students do it, and their eyes get very large because it's very hard to pull your hand away. They get a little scared looking in their eyes. Because it sucks a lot of air even at idle, and it pulls your hand in pretty good, apparently. See, and the Venturi is ineffective. What?
When Tommy caught the bottle on fire.
Thus the need for an idle circuit. I guess I would say the same thing. Hit the off switch. You could reach it. Maybe. If you used your right hand. If you used your right hand, I don't think you could if you used your left hand, you could. Okay. So when we're at idle, right, the Venturi doesn't work. It's too big around. Here's part of a Venturi. Too big around. Not enough air flowing through it. So we're going to have the idle circuit. So when idle, oh no, when throttle. Let's say when throttle plate. When throttle plate is closed, the displacement of the pistons creates a low pressure or vacuum above the throttle plate let me see, which is called the manifold or intake manifold. So above the throttle plate is our intake manifold. Let me see. Yeah, I just wrote it different on my notes. So when the throttle plate is closed, the displacement of the piston creates a low pressure or vacuum in the above the throttle plate, also called the intake manifold. So everything from the throttle plate to the cylinders is intake manifold. So it's not air movement, it's just a syringe. The pistons are syringes pulling back, trying to suck in air, and we've covered up the air inlet so we get a vacuum in there. Let me see. What do I write next? No, I'm not quite that. Some countries use airflow. Let's pass the throttle plates. I'm going to skip that one. System contains. What does it contain? Parts. Idle discharge nozzle. Nozzles. There's usually 2, sometimes 3. Maybe I've seen 4. Some are just drilled passages. One will be adjustable. I should have just followed my notes. Now it's not gonna, it's all weird out. Some are just drilled passages. One will be adjustable. Let's see. Well, I don't know how to say it, but I've already said it. So we have the throttle plate in here. So we're always going to have one passage drilled in above it. And then we may have another passage drilled right about where it's closed. And then another one drilled down here. So we have 3 passageways. Has fuel in it.
So the more of those passages, the smoother the transition.
Well, we're going to need more air. So without this third one, what would happen is, right here, the way I'd see that is we have a vacuum up top. So I would see this one is being sucked out. This particular one right here, this center one, couple of things. One, the air has to get by that way. Well, air is going to accelerate. It gets to that little crack. So what did we create? A low pressure. So that is going to draw out fuel because of that low pressure. It's aimed right at it. So you think, well, is that high pressure or low pressure? It's halfway between. No, I'm going to say there's a Venturi right there. It's going to really suck it out. And then use red for air. So this is air. This one down here is under regular air pressure. That is going to actually act as an air bleed. And so we have the tube coming up here. So that's going to act as an air bleed because this has higher pressure down there, which is going to emulsify the fuel. So we have 2 that are in operation as fuel nozzles, and one is acting as an air bleed, an additional air bleed. And then eventually the throttle valve is going to change positions, and it's going to be aimed down like that. Well, when it's doing that, then this is going to now turn into a fuel nozzle. So it depends on where the throttle plate is, what it's going to do. They don't all do the same thing all the time. So two of them are always going to be, in this case, this example. I could have drawn the example where only one is a discharge nozzle and two are air bleeds. Then it becomes 2 nozzles and 1 air bleed, and then it becomes 3 nozzles. So it just depends on how the carburetor is designed. But you just have to look at that and say, well, when the throttle's closed, anything below it, with an updraft carburetor, anything below it is going to be an air bleed. And it's going to become a discharge nozzle in a little bit.
I just asked how smooth, because how I understand it, you have a bit of a stuttering period between going from your idle circuit to your main discharge.
Okay, well, if you didn't have something like this,
You only have like 2 versus 3.
yeah, we had 2 versus 3, so we only have 2. So when the throttle is right here, then we have fuel and fuel. And then I open it to here. Boy, this is all slow now. I open it to there, and now I'm getting a lot more air, and I'm not getting more fuel because I maxed out the fuel on these two. So what happens now? It's going to start running lean. And it's going to get leaner and leaner until eventually the main discharge nozzle starts to work. So that's not a good transition. So it helps the transition between idle. It keeps adding more fuel until eventually the main discharge nozzle can start to work. So that's what I wanted to write with my notes, but I kind of went off. So idle discharge, I said maybe just drilled passages, maybe several passages, some above and below the throttle plate. As throttle plate is open, more holes are exposed, adding more fuel. Uncovered passages may be used as additional air bleeds. But I drew a picture instead. And then we have, parts in the idle system. We have the discharge nozzles. We have the idle metering jet. Idle metering jet. Because you still need to regulate fuel. Or maximum fuel. So you have that. It's a little tiny thing on these carburetors. And this is going to be a fun one. Idle mixture adjustment. All right. So I hope everybody's awake for this one, because the key to every single thing we're going to study, and every single oral, I'm going to ask you the same series of questions. How do you adjust it? And you can always adjust, and typically only, well, some things you can adjust more, but there's only 2 things that you can adjust in the field without putting calibrated gauges and having manuals and all kinds of stuff on any system. And that is idle speed, idle mixture. So you can always adjust idle mixture and idle speed. Doesn't matter if it's a float carburetor, pressure carburetor, fuel injection system. I think I covered everything. Turbocharged, non-turbocharged. You can adjust idle speed and idle mixture. All right, so let's see. Let's talk about idle mixture, because this drawing is better. If we look at, oh, I forgot. I have it. Wow, I read a lot. There we go. Oh, it's big. Right there, so everybody can see it. So this one has 2 passages. 2 passages. 1, 2 for the idle, right? Okay, so let's talk about idle mixture. Idle mixture is adjusted right here. By screwing it in, I'm going to limit the amount of fuel coming out of here. By screwing it out, I will increase fuel. That's easy, right? Everybody can remember that. But how do you know what is correct? And almost everything is going to ask you to have an idle rise, or sorry, we'll call it idle cutoff. Cutoff rise of, I'm going to say 25 to 75 RPM. Some books will say 25 to 50. Some will say a little bit more. But if I say 25 to 50, 75, I'm in the ballpark. That counts for everything. So this idle cutoff does not work on a Stromberg. It's the one that doesn't do it. All of the other fuel systems, you can shut off the carburetor and the engine by pulling the mixture out, and it will cut off the fuel. So carburetors are designed, aircraft carburetors, their nature is, if this is idle, and this is wide open throttle, and I think I said this yesterday, and this is rich, and this is lean, idle should be rich. In the cruising area, it's going to be lean, and wide open throttle, it's rich again. So it's got to be lean in this area, but in idle, it is rich. And when I talk about rich or lean, it's got to be in reference to something, right? So that's in reference to best power. Now, this is where people can get confused, because a little bit ago, we were talking about rich and lean of peak. Peak what? EGT. Not talking about EGT right now. So EGT has nothing to do with what I'm talking about at all. All right? So it's all about best power. So with a Marvel Schebler carburetor, which I only have a little piece of one, when you pull the mixture back, there's a little valve in there, and it sits at a hole, and it's got an opening, and it actually closes off the opening so fuel can't get through. Oops, I had it upside down. There you go. There's the ball. Anyway, so and it goes in that little spot right there, and goes into a hole. So it literally shuts off the fuel at the carburetor. We now know the Stromberg won't work that way, because what kind of mixture is it?
Yeah, it's air.
Air. Proper name is back suction. We don't have the back suction, so it doesn't work. All right, so when you're in an airplane and you're running it up, you're the mechanic, you run it up. This is something you do on every run up you ever do, is when you're shutting down the engine, well, first thing I do is I take the key and I go to off and back on real quick to make sure that the key works, so I know I'm safe when I get out. Okay, the safety check, make sure that key shuts everything off, then go back on real quick because I don't want it off. Then I'm going to have it at idle. I'm going to reach over. I'm going to grab the rev knob, pull it all the way out, about that fast, all the way. And I'm going to listen, and I'm going to watch the RPM. And it should go up about 25 to 50 RPM and then die at about that speed. Up, die. It may take a second before it goes up, but once it goes up, you got about that much time before it's just going to die. So what happened is you've shut off the fuel. So the fuel is now being exhausted through the carburetor, and the engine, it doesn't know what's going on. It's just, it was running rich, too rich, and so the idle was down a little bit. Then it went lean enough, just a little bit leaner. I don't want to use the word lean. It went from rich to best power mixture to super lean to die, all in that 2-second period. So when it was too rich, it meant that it wasn't getting its best power, so the idle was down a little bit. And then when I killed it, or pulled the power off, the mixture, it suddenly saw its best power for just a second, and the RPM speeds up, and then it ran out of fuel and died. Everybody follow that? Because if you can get that, you can get just about everything in lab done without a problem. And what happens, people go out to the test stand and they have no idea what they're doing. And it's just such an easy thing to do. So I'm running the engine, and I pull back on the mixture, and it goes 150 RPM, then dies. What does that tell me?
You were too rich.
Everybody see why? I was too rich. It was running so rich that it went from it was 150 RPM less than best power.
It's gotta be a little bit over the hill. You don't gotta be crazy over it.
Got to be, yeah, that was a good analogy. You got to, I should get the picture up. You're way over the hill. So we'll turn it around and go like this. So this should be rich or lean on this side.
Lean.
Lean, this should be rich. All right, and so this is perfect best power, top, peak of the hill. And I want it to run right here. Well, that's 25 to 50 RPM. And so when I pulled the mixture back, it went here, there, and died. And died. Right? But if I got 150 RPM, that means that the engine was set up and running right here, and it had to go all the way through here and then died. Follow? Okay, so how do I correct this?
Lean it up.
Screw that little knob in a little bit. It was, you want me to look at show the picture? You got that? Screw the little knob in just a little bit. Try it again. Try it again. When you get that 25. And by the way, when you're doing this out on the test stand, you don't have to let it die every time. You can push the mixture back in real quick and it'll catch and keep running. Making
I
a
see a peak at 50 RPM.
yeah, make an adjustment with the Stromberg anyway. Or, I mean the Marvel Schebler. The Marvel Schebler, you can. This doesn't have the mixture on top, but you can just go back to rich real quick and the engine should start without you having hit the starter again. And you can keep doing that. On an actual airplane, you can't do that because the prop's right there. So,
So do you always make this adjustment on the test stand? You never do it on the airplane? You say?
you do both.
You both.
When I'm building an engine, I'm going to do it on the test stand because I'm not going to let it run wrong on the test stand. And I want to deliver it to the customer, at least mostly set up. When you're doing it on our ground power unit, I expect you to set, that's the whole point of doing it.
So we have to just assume.
Oh, and you're doing your engine.
It's set.
So you're going to, once you put the carburetor on the engine,
It's already on.
you guys are going to go run your engine.
It's set.
Yeah, you're going to start the engine, you're going to warm up the engine, and then we'll pull the mixture out and see what it does. And if it's right, you're done. If it's not, I'm going to say, well, now set up your carburetor before you do any more runs. So you'll set up the carburetor before you do any more runs. So you get your idle mixture correct. And then once you got that, you'll show me, then you can do high speed runs. When you're on the ground power unit, adjusting your carburetors, it's the same thing. You know, that's the whole point. Just going to give you a carburetor, say go out there and set up idle mixture and idle speed. Follow? On the ground power unit. Not the red, the yellow test stand. Yes?
So pretty much the goal is we want to keep the idle at 25 to 50, and if it's at 150, we know we need to turn it down a little bit.
Okay, you're scaring me because you said you want to keep it there.
No, I'm sorry, not keep it there. That's where you want it when you're, I guess, leaning it out to.
Okay, so yeah, I think I did lose you. The idle speed is about 550 to 650 RPM. So the engine is sitting there running at 550, we'll say 600. It's running at 600 RPM. That's idle, okay? Then you pull the red knob, it should go from 600 to 625 to 650 and then die. Right? But idle speed's a relative thing. That's why I want to be careful. It's good you brought that up. So you follow that?
So if it goes to 100, then you know you have to leave it out.
Let's say you're correct, but let's just so everybody's on the same page. We're at 600 and it goes to 700. That was a 100 RPM rise, is what we say in the industry. 100 RPM rise, that is it was running too rich, so we have to lean it out. So we'll screw the screw in. Now let's say I'm running it at 600. I pull the thing out, it's at 600, it goes, dies. Now what? That means I was running over here on this side of things. And so it went from here, just died. All right, so we have to do what? Have to screw it out and enrichen it. Well, I richen it, now it's, 150. What does that mean? I richened it too much. Screw it in a little bit. Try it again. It's a trial and error thing. Okay? So that's idle mixture. Now here's the problem with the Stromberg carburetor. Can you do this with the Stromberg?
No.
You can't because it won't die. It'll run all day long. Now you can, if you want, you really could, shut the fuel valve off and wait for the fuel to exhaust itself out of the fuel lines and then see what it does. I've tried it once and I got too bored that I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. All right, so you can't do this. I take it back. You can, I won't. I won't do this on a running airplane. Like Evan, so if he brought his Luskin to me and said, hey, we want you to set up this Stromberg carburetor, idle speed, idle mixture, I would say, turn off the engine. I would screw that screw in all the way and be very careful because people tighten it up and it smashes the seat into the needle and ruins everything. I would gently screw it in until it stopped. I would turn it out 1.5 turns and I would say, you're good. Give it a shot. And so you'd start it up. Idle's good, no black smoke. Try to accelerate it. It accelerates, then we're done, right? And then that's it, all right? I'm not doing anything more than that unless the customer complains that it's running too rich or too lean and they can prove it. Otherwise, how else are you going to find out if you're rich or lean? Now, we have the advantage, or disadvantage if you like, on the ground power unit because there's no propeller and it's just an engine running. there's no reason why you can't set it up. So while it's sitting there running, and you can see the manifold pressure and the RPM, right? You have a manifold pressure and an RPM gauge, and an engine that's running, and you can adjust it while it's sitting there running. So we have, oops.
Build a bad habit almost.
What's that?
It might build like bad habits.
Oh, you won't have a habit of sticking your head in the propeller, I don't think so. But it's all right. So RPM. So we got the thing running at RPM. So we say we're running at 600. All right. I'm just making up a number. And our manifold pressure. Oh, geez, what the hell's the manifold pressure on that thing? Like, I'm going to say it's just at 15. Okay. So on this carburetor and this engine, as you mess with the mixture, if you turn it in, the mixture, it's sitting there at idle, and the mixture, as you turn it in and lean it, what will the RPM do? As you turn it in, that would be,
From full range. Oh, you're leaning it.
you're leaning it, so what's the RPM going to do?
It'll go up as it goes from peak initially.
All the way. You keep screwing it all the way in.
Oh, it'll go back down.
So eventually, it's going to start, lean is going to start going down, right?
It's gonna bump.
Yeah, you're going to go, screw it in until it says, whoa, that's going to die.
Sounds like a pig.
Okay, I don't know about that. So you start screwing it out. Then what's it going to do?
Go back up.
Okay, it's going to start going back up till what point?
Till peak
It's going to go up, 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 and then it's going to
Drop back down.
stop and start going back down, back down, back down, right? So you have the option of sitting there going, okay, I'm going to start lean. I'm going to go up, I'm going to go up. Oh, it peaks at 600. Now what do you do?
Keep going a little bit more.
Keep going until it gets to
650.
650 or 675. You follow?
So that's how you do in the Stromberg?
You can, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Okay. The RPM gauge is a little bit tricky on a lot of airplanes if it's not digital because they tend to bounce. So manifold doesn't. So you could watch the manifold pressure gauge instead. Problem is I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. But here's the thing. And this can confuse a lot of people. With the throttle plate unmoved, you cannot move the throttle plate. If I adjust the mixture and speed up the engine and the throttle plate didn't move, but the pistons start going up and down faster, what will that do to the manifold pressure? Create more suction or less suction? More suction. So it's going to drop, which would be that way. So as I enrichen it and the engine starts spinning faster, you will see the manifold pressure start to drop. And it will do the exact same thing RPM did it, but the opposite. It will go down, 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 stop, start going the other way. And you can set it up much faster with the manifold pressure. And I want to say, I just can't remember off the top of my head, I did write it in your sheet, your workbook. It's like it's an easy correlation. It's like every 0.25 inch, or it's almost like, I think 1 inch might equal 100 RPM. I don't know, I wrote it down in your book. So in your project sheet for running it. But it's in there. I would recommend manifold. But the thing you have to remember is that as the engine speeds up and the throttle plate doesn't move, that's the key right there. As the engine speeds up and the throttle plate doesn't move, as engine, okay, I can see you're not writing it down, speeds up and throttle does not move, MAP, manifold absolute pressure, will drop. Why am I making such a big deal about that?
People think it's the other way around.
Because in an actual operating airplane, as I open the throttle to speed up the engine, the manifold pressure goes up.
Say that again.
That makes sense.
In an actual operating airplane, or even this ground power unit, as you open the throttle plate, to give it more gas, more RPM, manifold pressure goes up. The only time manifold pressure goes down on an engine that is speeding up is you messing with the fuel.
Makes sense.
Otherwise, it speeds up because you gave it more pressure.
So if you increase throttle, if you open throttle, like you're saying, your manifold pressure will go up on your gauge, but only will go down in this.
This is the only time it's ever going to go down is when the throttle plate is held stationary and you're messing with the fuel.
What if you're at wide open throttle?
Then you're a wide open throttle.
Then you're not messing with the idle mixture, I hope.
Yeah, standing right next to it while someone's.
Okay, I shouldn't say the only time. So, like in any airplane that has a constant speed propeller, if I set my throttle at wide open throttle and then I pull the mixture or pull the prop all the way back to low RPM, the manifold pressure is going to go up because I've slowed the engine down, so it allows more time for air to get in. But I don't want to get into that right now. Screw with you a little bit. So make sure you understand that. Okay. Let's see. I guess it's a break time. Let me think about something here. Will you run off?